My name is Stevie J, and I'm joined by a special guest tonight, returning to the program, the one and only Brady Hicks.
Hey, Stevie, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
It is. And for our new listeners, people who are just now discovering Thursday Night AMP, who haven't heard your previous appearances on the show, why don't you give them a little background about yourself?
Well, sure thing, yeah. I've been writing for Pro Wrestling Illustrated as a freelance writer, as an associate writer since 2005. I've been around the block a few times. I contribute to the PWI 500 that people complain about every year, and I've been on the Philadelphia airwaves on WNJC 1360. I do some color commentary and some play-by-play here and there with different indies and stuff like that. And basically, I'm surrounded with this crap all the time.
You're living La Vida Loca, the pro wrestling life.
Ugh. Yes, I am. just like Ricky Martin.
Yes, well, Ricky Martin's not in the PWI Top 500, so fortunately he's not on topic tonight, but the rest of this list is because it's out.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting thanked for certain guys' rankings, and I didn't even know it was out yet, so they were one up on me. But I was pretty happy with the list this year, at least in terms of the top half for sure.
Yeah, well, I think almost everybody's got to be happy with the number one choice. I see a lot of people who are probably holding up the magazine right now, holding their fingers in the air, going, yes, yes, yes.
We go through this every year, and like I say, PWI is a business, We're looking to sell magazines, but it's great when you can sell a lot of magazines and actually have a selection that the fans can get behind, because for the longest time, people would just whine all the time anytime John Cena was selected, So it's great to see somebody different on top. I was a big proponent of Daniel Bryan last year as well, but this was his year. There was no mistaking it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, people need to understand the way that the list works, and I'll let you break that down, even though you've done it a couple of times on here before. They'll say, well, wait a minute, Daniel Bryan's been out of action for months and months now, but in the time period which he was compiled, he was very active.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Our time period generally runs from like the half year to the half year. So starting in the summer of last year all the way through the summer of this year, Daniel Bryan was by and large the guy on WWE television. I mean, he had missed some time toward the end of the grading period, but his action, his win-loss record, the quality of competition for the guys that he faced, and the fact that he main evented quite a few pay-per-views. And anytime he lost, it was something screwy. And more often than not, he was a winner.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of things that made a real difference. And this year, unlike the year before, it was actually singles competition. So, it was kind of a slam dunk.
Well, not only that, but how many times have you had somebody number one in the top 500 who's won twice in one WrestleMania? He won 2 matches this year.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And he was the focal point of WWE television for 8 or 9 months. And I'd have to believe that he probably still would be, if he hadn't suffered that neck injury.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see how they factor him back in now, because they've tried to fill in the gaps and put some new guys in the spot that were, slated to be on the rise, but perhaps they weren't ready to go that far that soon. And some of them are working out, some of them are faltering, some of them are getting injured just like he did. So it's kind of interesting to see the mix right now without Daniel Bryan, which makes it even more apparent why he was number one.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the depth, the WWE roster right now, it's kind of at an all-time low. And that's a shame, because there's a lot of talented guys in that company, but the problem is they have failed to elevate the guys that they need to elevate in order to get to that next level over a few years ago when other guys were on top. And that's a huge issue. I know for a fact, from having talked to people in the company, and just by knowing what I know about the people that are kind of behind the scenes in WWE, I know for a fact that they were looking for a reason for Daniel Bryan to probably fail. And the fact that he got hurt, I mean, in their eyes only validated the fact that they needed to be building around a bigger guy, I don't mean bigger in terms of personality. I mean bigger as in
Physical stature.
physical stature. Yeah, the definition of what a WWE superstar should be. Someone like John Cena.
Someone like Roman Reigns.
Someone like Roman Reigns. And ironically enough, what happened to Roman Reigns proves that it can happen to anybody.
Exactly. Thank you. You took my point right from me. That's what I was going to say is they thought they had a B plan and the B plan went awry too because of an incarcerated hernia.
Exactly.
But at least he's still in the list. I mean, he makes number 7, so Roman Reigns is on the rise even though he's going to be out for a while.
I mean, Roman Reigns, talk about momentum for this guy. I mean, I don't know how long he's going to be out. I mean, at this point, it sounds like he could be anywhere from, like another month to like
3.
maybe 1 until almost WrestleMania. I mean, who knows? But, I mean, talk about derailing, like, real momentum. And not just like the WWE wanting to get behind him. And by the way, that's part of the reason that I think Roman Reigns is so unique. Because not only is WWE willing to invest in him and get behind him, but the fans seem to love him too, which usually they have a very difficult time kind of marrying those two concepts.
They do. And it was actually bordering on slightly dangerous with Reigns before he got injured, which may actually do him a favor because they seem to have one formula for how to create a superstar. It's have him win against the odds all times, always come back from a beatdown, always challenge authority. You know, they basically turned him into John Cena 2.0. And I was starting to see a little bit of backlash to that. So for him to get some time off may actually do him a favor.
Yeah, it probably can't hurt. That's for sure. As long as WWE doesn't begin to lose faith in the guy, which I think would be a real shame. He seems to have that, in addition to that pedigree that we all knew that Roman Reigns had, being a Samoan, he has the physical gifts. I think with a little coaxing, getting him out of his shell, I think Roman Reigns could be something really special. And the fact that he was number 7 on the list this year, I thought that was a really fitting tribute to what the future may hold for Roman Reigns.
Yeah, when you go from 39 to number 7, I mean, that's just saying this is a guy that you can expect big things from. And they clearly think so too because they let him go on a tear at the Royal Rumble and break Kane's record for the most eliminations.
Yeah, and I have to think if he's back in time for this year's Royal Rumble. Now, granted, I did get in trouble last year thinking someone different was going to win the Royal Rumble, but I have to think that Roman Reigns is in the plans for the Royal Rumble in a big way.
I would think so too, but let's just go over the rest of this top 10 really quick, and then I'll hit some on the random names that always pop my interest when I see the 500. But right behind Daniel Bryan in the number 2 slot is Randy Orton, which I guess makes sense because he was the chosen one for the Authority. He was the one who got to hold the title for a long period of time, so he was the top player for most of that time period.
Yeah, I think, and I can't be sure because, again, I can't dip into the minds of everyone else who's on that panel with me. But I think the fact that Randy Orton was the one to finally unify the WWE and the World Heavyweight titles back in December, I think that played a large part in it because that was a huge win. And not only did he beat John Cena, the golden boy, to do that, but he also continued to successfully defend the title against Cena several times after, including on free TV as well as on pay-per-views, including the Royal Rumble. Randy Orton, win-loss-wise, was one of the more successful guys in WWE this year. Honestly, probably just as successful as Daniel Bryan, even though the fans don't want to hear that.
No, nobody ever wants to hear that anybody's better than Daniel Bryan if they're a Daniel Bryan fan, so it's a deserved spot. He's good at number 2, and I really don't have a problem with John Cena being number 3 either, because I'm not on the Cena hater bandwagon. I do get tired of Cena at times, but I know just how hard this guy works, and I respect the hell out of it.
Truth be told, I didn't have a problem with Cena as number 3 either. There were a couple guys that I was looking to put in that spot over Cena, but realistically, number 3 is fine for him. A couple of the guys that I thought for number 3 possibly over Cena, one included Bray Wyatt, who picked up a number of wins over John Cena. And at the time we were putting the list together over the summer, Bray Wyatt seemed to really have some momentum and seemed to be somebody that maybe looking forward, we would appear very visionary to put Bray Wyatt higher. Now, we were able to get him at 6, so I was pretty happy with that. Another guy that I thought possibly over John Cena, and I'm curious what you think, I was pushing for Magnus, just because of the body of work that he had in TNA over the course of the last year, in addition to having a pretty substantial title run for the company.
Well, I like Magnus at number 8, and I'll tell you why, but then I want to go back to 4 and 5 since we skipped over him a bit. But the reason I don't see Magnus as higher than 8 is because even though he was the focal part of TNA storylines, even though he was the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, they didn't do him any favors by the way they booked him, where he always seemed to have to cheap his way out to keep his title. He didn't look strong, even though he physically looked strong, but he wasn't booked as a strong champion.
He kind of took the Miz route there, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and anybody that takes the Miz route doesn't deserve to be higher than 8. But let's go back to number 4 and 5, because these are two people who I could have argued would be ahead of John Cena, but I'm not unhappy with where they are because their work in New Japan the last year has been phenomenal. AJ Styles and Kazuhika Okada.
Yeah, I was very happy with the placement of both of these guys, and in addition, the placement of Okada in the top 5, to me, if you're going to rank international talent, nobody can replace the kind of year that Okada had in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's just one of those names that just appears to have nothing but bigger things ahead of him, you know? I was very happy with that, and actually, in talking with other people, one thing that I loved about this year in particular is the number of strong independent names and also international stars who did very well for themselves. And Okada in the top 5 is a perfect example of that. As far as AJ Styles goes at number 4, I was a big proponent of AJ Styles, and I think a lot of fans, especially the bubblegum type that maybe would read the magazine, kind of think probably AJ Styles hasn't done much since he hasn't been on TNA. But the truth is, he's turned in a number of Match of the Year candidates wherever he's gone, you know, whether it's in the United States or Japan or wherever he's traveled, taking independent bookings or with Ring of Honor, with New Japan, anywhere that he's traveled. AJ Styles has had a really special kind of last couple months.
There's people who say that AJ Styles is killing himself by working the style that he's working right now, but he's also having the best matches of his career, and apparently, if you look at him, he's having the most fun he's ever had. It's like leaving TNA has breathed new life into him.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I've had AJ Styles on my program a number of times over the years, and the one common theme for him, and he's always been with TNA whenever I've interviewed him, has been frustration with the amount of work he was putting in versus the way he was perceived by people. I mean, sure, people respect the phenomenal AJ Styles, especially TNA fans, but at the same time, I think he really felt like something was missing. And I think AJ Styles is in a good place in his life. Like, he doesn't need TNA or even WWE to come calling. Like, if they do, that's fine. But, you know, he's at this point, he's just kind of giving back to the sport that's given so much to him. And he's content just forging a name for himself on his own without being on our TV all the time.
Yeah, well, you can get him on your TV all the time. You'll just have to torrent it or watch an iPay-per-view at 3 in the morning.
Exactly, yeah. And there are plenty of ways to see AJ Styles, believe me. And I have no doubt either that his presence in Ring of Honor is only going to grow with time, too.
I would expect so. I think that relationship between ROH and New Japan can always be reopened and explored further at any time if he's going to mainly work for New Japan. But then again, we do hear a lot these days about Global Force Wrestling partnering with New Japan, so that throws a monkey wrench in the mix.
Well, it'll it'll be interesting for sure. I don't know a whole lot about Global Pro Wrestling. I mean, obviously, I know the people behind it and such, but it's kind of like the elephant in the room among wrestling promoters at this point. Like, they know it's there. Nobody wants to talk about it because they don't really know what to say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so what are you going to do with that? You have to wait and see who makes the next move. And, what I hear right now is that both Global Force and TNA are negotiating for the same TV channels to carry their programming. And I have to think if somebody's going to get a slot on like a Velocity or a WGN America, it's probably TNA because they already have a proven audience of 1 million to 1.3 million viewers every week, whereas Global Force has proven nothing.
I would think so as well. I was thinking about this the other day, and by the way, I did just see that news item too. It kind of like was a duh item for me because, like, I mean, obviously they're going to be competing for the same kind of contracts. I mean, Global Force doesn't have any much of a body to go off of other than the people that are behind it at this point. But one thing that TNA has going for it, and I've been saying this for a long time, TNA Wrestling is such a strong international brand.
Yeah. It's a lot bigger in the United Kingdom than it is in the U.S.
Yeah, and Australia as well, and parts of Asia. If TNA were able to somehow find a way to parlay that into a way to make money in the U.S., whether that's some sort of a strong international deal, or maybe it's relocating some of the time somehow, finding some money to relocate and run more tours overseas, get some assets overseas, and become more of an international company. I think TNA could be around for a long time, and I'm one of the only people that thinks that.
It's just a question of them putting together the right money to sustain themselves. That's all they need. As long as they can get the financing one place or another through TV deals and whatever they do make off merchandise, if they get just enough to get by, they'll Dixie, look, I mean, I'll put this the nicest way I can. She's a mark for wrestling. She'll want to keep it going as long as it's viable.
Unfortunately for Dixie, she's not a money mark, as they say,
No, the money seems to have run dry on her. It used to be, she used to have the spigot flowing. She used to have the whole Ted Turner, Eric Bischoff situation where he just kept pouring money in and pouring more money in, but that well ran dry a while ago for her.
Yeah, it obviously did, but it will be interesting to see because TNA is kind of one of those, I guess you call it like a boom or bust promotion at this point, depending on how things play out for them over the next 2 to 3 months, TNA could really excel and really find their niche and kind of renew themselves as the number 2 company in the U.S. and certainly number 2 challenging for number 1 internationally, or they could just go away altogether.
They could.
I don't think that's going to happen because I think that there will be a TV deal out there for them, but it's definitely going to be boom or bust.
Well, speaking of boom or bust, I'm going to skip one number over to number 10 and then come back to number 9 because Bully Ray was definitely a big star for TNA over the 12-month period the list was compiled, but he's working on a day-to-day contract now, and it appears that Bound for Glory, the New Japan or Wrestle 1 pay-per-view, sorry, I've got New Japan on the brain now, maybe because Tanahashi's number 11, but we'll get to that.
Hey,
no.
We got him in there, right?
Yeah, we got him in there, but I'm just saying that he's going over to work the Bound for Glory pay-per-view for Wrestle 1 and TNA, and then after that, I think Bully Ray is done with TNA, so he deserves the number 10 spot, but he's probably going to be out of there real quick.
Oh, yeah, I think so, absolutely, but you know what? I was really happy with Bully Ray in the top 10 because he's been a really important guy in TNA for quite a while. And his body of work in the last year has only solidified that. Even as recently as this summer, when he renewed his team with Brother Devon, and they took on the Hardys and the Wolves in thrilling matches, As recently as, like, 2 weeks ago on TNA Impact, these guys are still turning in Match of the Year candidates. And Bully Ray, I know a lot of people don't think so, but he's a big part of the reason why. Because the guy has a brilliant mind for the business. He's an incredible wrestler, His body may be starting to wear down a little bit, but he's got it all in his head.
Yeah, everybody says that Bully Ray booked his own angles in TNA, that he came up with the storylines and scripts and they let him run with it.
Oh, I have no doubt that he did. He's a brilliant guy. He really is. And I think part of the reason why he had difficulty excelling as a singles guy in WWE is because he was very vocal about what worked and didn't work. And as we know, in the political culture of WWE, a lot of times, being very vocal about things that work and don't work isn't always a very popular thing.
Yeah, you can get away with it depending on who you are. If you're a guy like Randy Orton and you're vocal and you complain about things, they'll tend to say, okay, we'll listen to what you have to say. But if you're Zack Ryder and you complain and bitch and moan, you're out of luck.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And even as recently as, like, look at CM Punk and what happened with him leading up to his departure in January, how disappointed he was with the way his run was going in WWE, shaping up for 2014. And CM Punk is one of those guys who was very vocal about what worked and didn't work. Now, granted, a lot of that I think was vanity, and a lot of that was probably a little bit selfish because he wasn't placing himself in the overall picture of WWE and where he needed to be to help them as a company. He was only looking at it from one point of view, but at the same time, here's a guy who saw what wasn't working, tried to point it out from his end to have it fixed, and when they were less than receptive, over time got very frustrated with that fact.
Yeah. So, it's all about how you play your cards. If you show your hand and get too frustrated with where you are when you're booked in any wrestling company, but in particular WWE, if you overplay your hand and complain too much, they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but sometimes the squeaky wheel just gets thrown on the trash heap.
It's a very delicate balance between talking too much and kind of not saying anything.
I agree. So Now to backtrack to number 9, Adam Cole, who we keep hearing is getting feelers from WWE about them wanting to bring him in.
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that he's been getting feelers for a long time, but that's all it's been, have been feelers, I think WWE would love for Adam Cole to relocate to Florida, to come in, do a tryout for them, kind of hang out in Orlando and, work a few of the NXT style matches and see what he's capable of, because I see big things in Adam Cole's future. The biggest detriment to Adam Cole, and this could be part of the reason why it's only been feelers so far, is his size. Yeah. And again, Adam Cole's an amazing competitor, but he's not a very big guy. I mean, he's on par with Austin Aries.
He's like the size of an Aries or a Bryan, and the working ability of those guys.
I mean, Adam Cole, and Adam Cole's younger, which is another thing that, I mean, just because he isn't in WWE right now, in like his late 20s, doesn't mean he won't be in WWE in 5 years. The problem with Adam Cole, and this, I do think the biggest problem is that when you have size issues and you're kind of pigeonholed as sort of a high flyer type, I think a lot of times that kind of dissuades WWE from going full bore into you. Like, if you're going to be small, you need to be exceptional in many different areas. And Adam Cole is an exceptional athlete, don't get me wrong, and he's one of my closest personal friends in wrestling, but I think Adam Cole it needs to refine his style a little bit if he wants WWE to really seriously take a look at him.
I think you're probably right, but if they gave him the chance to showcase his skills all around, I mean, he's developed a really good promo over the last 2 years, and like you said, he could definitely fly. But I think also when he works with somebody that wants to do a technical catch, we've seen that he can do that as well. So I think if they brought him in, gave him a tryout, and let him showcase all of the things he could do, that he would shine. He could, you say that it takes an exceptional level of talent for somebody to be able to achieve that. Well, we've seen Rey Mysterio achieve it. We've seen Daniel Bryan achieve it. I think Adam Cole could too.
You know what? I kind of do too, and I didn't mean to sound harsh for Adam Cole. In actuality, I can tell you that a few years ago, WWE gave Adam Cole a list of things to work on. And check by check, he's accomplished all of them, including showing a lot more personality in his interviews and things like that. He's taken some acting classes. He's gotten really good, at working babyface or heel. He has a personality that he didn't have before. And he has this evolving mind for the business that's unlike anybody else really at his age and at his level, what he's accomplished. I think Adam Cole has a very bright future in this industry. And if TNA were a little bit healthier, I think Adam Cole would have been there a long time ago, if he even wanted to. But I do kind of feel like he's holding out hope that WWE is going to call his number at some point, especially with his close friend Sami Callihan there.
Just a brief note before I get to the rest of the list, and we're going to touch on a few names here and there, and then we're going to wrap it up. But how ironic is it that Okada was actually working in TNA, and they never really did anything with him, and now he's number 5 and a big star in New Japan. It's like, this just proves that TNA lets people slip through their fingers.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does, and I'm sure that that was kind of like no harm intended on TNA's part. I think that just sometimes they get certain ideas for certain guys, and for whatever you want to say about TNA versus WWE, I think one of the biggest differences between the two companies is that WWE is willing to adapt to a situation. They could have a long-term plan for somebody. But if something changes in their eyes or in the fans' eyes, or the way they perceive somebody changes, they'll roll with that. Whereas TNA, I think that they're much more kind of stick to the plan, let it play out, and then we'll take it from there.
Right. Well, they do like to book pretty far ahead. When it works, it's great, because if they've got a plan and they stick to it, that's fantastic. But like you said, it can be to their detriment too, because if something doesn't work, they're going to stick it out to the bitter end, no matter what.
Yeah, and what better example? I mean, we were talking about Daniel Bryan earlier. What better example to WWE's willingness to adapt than earlier this year, back in January, when they thought, we're going to give the fans Batista and they're going to love it. And when that clearly didn't happen, obviously all parties were very upset by that. Probably none more than WWE and Batista himself. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether they wanted to or not, you can say whether it was in the plans all along or not. To me, their plan, what they presented on TV, was for Batista to go over at WrestleMania. And at some point, they started listening to people. And they started seeing the reactions that Daniel Bryan was getting. And they started seeing that for the past year, Daniel Bryan is the guy who's been getting over in the company. And they changed that. And I don't know that kind of a change on such a major scale before their biggest pay-per-view of the year is something that TNA could ever do.
I agree.
The only time I can ever think of that TNA improvised when it wasn't supposed to happen was when they listened to the fans and they gave the title to Austin Aries over Bobby Roode. That's the only time I can remember in TNA's history.
But that didn't last, unfortunately. He didn't have a super long reign with it.
Yeah, I don't remember, but he did last through Bound for Glory, I believe.
I think you're right about that. I'd have to go back and check. But since we're running low on time, I'm not going to look that up right this second. I want to hit a few of these other names on the list before we wrap. And
Oh, sure. Take your time.
Hiroshi,
I know we said a half an hour, but, whatever you need. I'm feeling good.
well, I will do the best I can here, but I'm fighting a cold, so it may not be too much longer. But Hiroshi Tanahashi being number 11. Now, if Okada hadn't had the year he had, I could see him being in the top 10, but I don't have a problem with him at 11.
No, I don't either. I mean, now, granted, granted with Tanahashi, I do think that last year's oversight definitely played a part in getting Tanahashi ranked as high as he did. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't deserve number 11. It's just to say that he was very conscious in all of our minds. And like you said, if Okada didn't have the year that he did, I kind of could see Tanahashi slipping into the top 10, absolutely, because he was a major name in wrestling once again this past year.
Indeed he was. And I like the rest of this top 20. Cesaro, Seth Rollins, Elgin, stuck in Canada right now, but hopefully coming back soon. Lashley, he's been the TNA heavyweight champion. That makes sense. Batista, who we talked about getting the big push coming back. And, Batista's probably even getting a better push from Guardians of the Galaxy right now. So that keeps his name out there where, even when he's not wrestling, people are still talking about him. But I don't know if I feel the same way with Eric Young and his fishing show. I mean, okay, he did have a run as the TNA World Champion, but let's focus on that one for a second because a lot of people thought that was like a joke or a fluke.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, and furthermore, I didn't see this personally, but I think a lot of people felt like they were trying to rip off the Daniel Bryan angle with like an ultimate underdog type with a big beard who the fans like.
There was a lot of comparisons between the two.
I don't personally see it other than the beard. I feel like they're light years apart in what they've been able to accomplish in the last year. But when I look at Eric Young, and furthermore for that matter, when I look at El Terrible at number 20, Dean Ambrose, Nakamura, Elgin, Cesaro, Seth Rollins, Tanahashi, the top 20 this year, we, as a panel, made a real concerted effort to recognize the strong body of work of very talented in-ring guys, probably more so than the storylines like we've kind of focused on more in past years in the 500. I was very happy with the level of talent that we were able to get ranked very high this year. And I think that that's kind of one thing that has really defined this year's list is that the body of work that the guys ranked have been able to achieve.
I agree. And nobody could ever say that Eric Young isn't a fantastic wrestler and was probably greatly underutilized by TNA long before he had his run as the World Heavyweight Champion. So it would have been taken seriously if they had recognized the level of the talent that he had a long time before that and not just made him a comedy figure.
But that's part of the problem is when you're a comedy figure for that long and then suddenly a company wants to take you seriously. I mean, unless your push is done in comedy, it's very difficult to have people really want to see it play out.
I agree. So a couple other names that I'll mention real quick, and then we'll get towards the end of wrapping it up. Okay. Dean Ambrose coming in at number 18, solid. I think that's going to be a spot he can rise from, given especially that right now he's the top babyface on house shows with Roman Reigns being out and Cena not working full time. So Dean is in a good spot right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've been saying it for a long time about Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose. Obviously, you know who I'm talking about. You probably even know who I'm talking about if I say Titty Master.
Yeah.
Because Jon Moxley is kind of one of those names that for a lot of years transcended the independent scene, and it's great to see that he's finally able to do what he's doing on such a major scale. I think within the next year, for sure, we're probably going to see Dean Ambrose in a few main events. If there were 2 world titles, I think Dean Ambrose would probably be a world champion. I think he's a little off from the WWE title still. But I think that's certainly within a career trajectory. It's absolutely possible. I love the influence that Dean Ambrose seems to have from guys like Brian Pillman, Jake the Snake, and Shawn Michaels. I love the way he's been able to incorporate that into his persona for so long. I don't know if you caught it, but WWE did kind of a special before SummerSlam. The WWE Network did one.
The Journey of the Shield, right.
The Journey of the Shield. And they were showing interviews of Dean Ambrose from when he was in Dragon Gate USA.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff, the work that he did there, was absolutely amazing. And I can say that firsthand because I was actually in that little room when he was recording a few of those promos. And it's just such powerful stuff. And it was such a pleasure to see that on WWE television because, like, a lot of times they get a bad rep for not promoting things that aren't their own. But they were able to really take a lot of that footage and convince you, if you weren't convinced already, that Dean Ambrose is a major star and he's only going to get bigger.
Amen to that. And I think actually that's going to be my last note about the PWI 500 before we wrap up is the guys that are there that are going to be the next generation and taking off. And as long as people take notice of them, they're going to be huge because I see Kevin Steen, 27, Prince Devitt, number 30, Kenta is number 32.
Yes.
You know, it's like that next generation. Even Adrian Neville, he comes in the top 40 at number 39.
I know you want to wrap up. Can I do a shout out?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Number 187 is a guy by the name of Bull Dempsey. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Oh, yeah, I see him on NXT all the time. He's been feuding with Mojo Rawley.
He's a guy who has been trying to get into the 500 as long as I've been a writer, just about. His name is James Smith. He's a very good friend of mine. He's done a lot of local promotions in between Philadelphia and New York, basically, including a lot of work with Matt Bourne when Matt Bourne, Doink, was running promotions and stuff like that. He's worn a diaper as Baby Huey. We've tried that gimmick to get him in his number 500 in that gimmick spot, you know, and he's never been able to crack it. Never made it to the list. And I pushed for him every single year, and I felt terrible, you know, because he was a friend and because he's a very good worker, and I always felt like this guy had potential. And when he signed with WWE about a year ago, I said, here's a guy, nobody knows who he is right now, but within the next 2 years, he's going to be on Raw or SmackDown because he has a different kind of look. He's kind of built like Bray Wyatt a little bit. You know, he's not the super jack dude, but he's got a great look. And I don't know if this Bull Dempsey gimmick works, but I am so happy that this guy is on the list because I think his star is only going to rise. And in a lot of respects, and I said this to him when I texted him the other day, I felt like it was a real shame that it took a WWE contract for him to be recognized for being a top 500 guy in the world, because I feel like he's been there for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we do have to give one more shout out before we wrap it up, because he definitely deserves to be 187 on an Undercover Cop in the list, but we can never go a year we look at the PWI 500 without looking at Mr. 500, who this year is Grado.
Yeah, Grado. I saw the video package for him. Always entertaining. Certainly different. You know, I have to give credit here, as I do most years for number 500 and a lot of these lower guys. By the way, 497, Princeton's educated Nathan Avery making the list as well. He's another close personal friend of mine. A guy who I feel like should get a lot more recognition for the ability that he has in the ring. But yeah, I mean, Dan Murphy out of Buffalo, he is just one of these workhorses. I mean, he's carried PWI on his back for years. He wrote most of the 500 for years. He's the one that gets thousands of submissions from all these different independent guys and kind of pares it down for us and allows us to, like, sit down and let the chips fall. But without the hard work of Dan Murphy, I have no idea how we'd be able to put this kind of a massive list together. So, Grado, another great find by Dan Murphy as he continues his strong body of writing work.
Yep, absolutely. So, for the rest of the PWI 500, let's tell them how they can get it if they want to read this whole list.
Well, sure, absolutely. PWI-online.com. You can Google Pro Wrestling Illustrated if you don't remember the website. You'll find a link to purchase the digital version, which for $4.95 you can buy that. You'll instantly get the PDF copy, so you can stream that right away on your computer, your tablet, your smartphone, whatever you may want. It's also in stores, and I know nowadays it seems like print magazines are harder and harder to find. Personally, the only ones I'm ever able to find anymore are fantasy football magazines in August. But, it's one of those things where if you don't support print magazines, then they're going to go away. And certainly the digital copy of the PWI 500 is proof of that, because right now that's what's selling, And so definitely go to PWI-online.com, check out the digital copy, maybe buy a physical copy as well. I'm going to tell you to go buy both. It's a great investment for $15. You get both.
Right.
I don't know why you want both, but you should get them both.
And then you could have it on your phone and tablet, or you could take it with you and read it wherever you go if you don't have your tablet.
Right, and then you can bitch either way.
Indeed you can. But Brady, is always a pleasure, and of course, put out some personal plugs for yourself.
Oh, thank you, yeah. I feel like every year my plugs change so much, but the one constant is In the Room, which runs every Tuesday night live. The website doesn't change. It's thebradyhicks.com. My Twitter hasn't changed. It's @BradyHicks. You can also search for me on Facebook, Brady Hicks Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So go find me there. In the Room this year merged with the VOC Nation Radio Network, which I'm very proud of. I'm actually the general manager of the VOC Nation now. It's a fantastic network with programming almost every day of the week live. So go check that out. That's thebradyhicks.com and vocnation.com. Also the play-by-play commentator for two very special companies, the first being New Moon Rising Wrestling, which I always call the little company that could. I see great things in their future, and it's only going to continue to get better. I'm also the play-by-play commentator for the East Coast Wrestling Association once again, the ECWA, the guys that run Super 8. And on October 11th at Carneys Point, New Jersey, the ECWA will be presenting the first ever Super 8 chick fight with 8 of the top independent women's wrestlers in the world vying for the traditional Super 8 glory. So, ECWAProWrestling.com. New Moon's website, I believe, is down right now, but you can find that New Moon Rising Wrestling fan page on Facebook.
All right. Well, that's everything that's fit the plug. So, Brady, thanks again, and it's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Stevie, thank you so much, and yeah, definitely. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's been Thursday Night EMP with our special guest, Brady Hicks.